Hello and welcome to this latest webinar in the e-commerce world review. Today we're talking about the rise of retail media, a very topical and exciting subject. I'm Paul Skeldon, I'm one of the editors at RetailX and the author of our latest report into retail media, which I shall be giving you some of the highlights from momentarily. And then I'm going to be joined in discussion with Octavie from Miracle Ads, who's going to help us get a view really of what's happening on the ground with many retailers who are using retail media. So Octavie, hello, and thanks for joining us. Tell us a little bit about what Miracle Ads is, because I think a lot of people possibly aren't really that familiar with it.
Yes, definitely. Thanks, Paul. So I'm really happy to be here. So I'm Octavie, Vice President of Miracle Ads. Miracle is more renowned as a leading enterprise marketplace and dropship solutions, empowering retailers and B2B business to launch and scale their platform solution. But over the past 2 years, we have started to develop our retail media solutions, named Miracle Ads, to allow retailers to monetize all their digital business, not only 1P, but also marketplaces effectively. And so we have developed a solution around the maximization of the adoption from brands, sellers, and suppliers, and around relevancy, personalization, which is key for our marketplaces. And last point is also giving control and flexibility to retailers. We have launched 9 months ago, and 15 clients have trusted us to launch a retail media program with us since the beginning.
Excellent. I mean, it's a very timely thing to do, and it's a lovely tie-up, I think, between what you already do with marketplaces, as you say, and this emerging world of retail media, which we shall get into shortly. But first of all, what I'm going to do is treat you all to some of the highlights from our recently published retail media report. There's a link there for those of you that want to go and download it. We'll have that up on the screen at the end as well while we're having a discussion, so you don't feel you have to scribble it down right now. I'm just going to go through some of the key findings. There's an awful lot more in it than what we're going to touch on in this webinar. I just want to sort of set the scene really with what our sort of research and our research of the research that's out there into retail media has revealed, and what that sort of shows us about where this market is going, before we sort of have a proper discussion about sort of some of the issues that sort of raises for retailers and for brands. So I'm going to split this into, I'm going to mainly concentrate on the retailer's perspective around retail media, because we tend to focus on retailers being RetailX, but I will also put in some of the information we have also about how brands view retail media. In the report, we also look at the agency perspective. We also have a section devoted specifically to marketplaces, and we also look at some of the consumer data on how consumers are influenced by brands, where they see that brand messaging and all that kind of thing. So there's a lot more in the report. For the sake of brevity here, I've just picked out the sort of key aspects of it, which to me are the retailers and the brands. So headline findings really is that it's no surprise that retail media ad spend has grown considerably and rapidly over the past few years. Projections are that it will continue to grow. The figure we've settled on is that it's worth about 125.7 billion US dollars in 2023. I don't think that's probably a definitive figure. There's a lot of retail media networks out there owned by big retailers. They do not report the figures separately for their retail media network revenues. So in all likelihood, this figure is considerably higher. But for the sake of demonstrating how the market has grown and moved and where it's going, I think we can sort of, if you take out the hard numbers and just look at the trend, the direction of travel, you can see that growth continues to be steady and reasonably rapid. It's a very much a growing segment of revenue generation for retailers. Looking at how that translates into digital advertising spend, it's rapidly grown to be around 20% of digital media spend. That's set to continue. It flattens out. I think what's interesting in that is it doesn't show that retail media is plateauing, what it really shows is that it maintains a consistent part of an ever-growing digital ad spend. So digital ad spend is going to increase across the board. Around 20% of it is going to be dedicated specifically to retail media, which, again, is considerably higher than it was in 2018 there, and than it has been for many years prior to that. But it just shows that it is now a significant part, a fifth of overall total ad spend. That's quite sort of significant. And that's a trend that will continue. Retail adoption of retail media, as you can see there, if you look at the dark blue lines, that's retailers that already have some sort of retail media network offering. It's strong. It's fairly consistently strong across the US and Europe, slightly lower there in Northeast Asia. We don't have figures for the entire world because they're not comparing necessarily like with like, but these are the most sort of comparable figures we could find. Interestingly, it's stretched ahead ever so slightly there in Europe than it has in the US, which has traditionally been the sort of leader in the retail media adoption. Obviously has some of the biggest retailers that are running the biggest retail media networks. I think interestingly, there's quite a significant amount of exploring those sort of offerings already. So I think we're going to see even more retail media networks crop up over the next year, perhaps two, and many more, pretty much all of them, then have a future plan for retail media networks across the board. So it's becoming a significant part of retailers' revenue streams. It's going to become an even more significant one. We're going to see more and more retailers doing it. And I think this is where it gets interesting with Miracle's proposition, is that it's going to enable all sorts of retailers to be able to have some sort of retail media offering. But we shall come to that when we have a chat after I've whipped through the headline data. Where retailers believe the budget's coming from, I think, again, you can digest this in your own time. But what's particularly interesting is that 30% nearly there, it's nearly a third, believe it's entirely new marketing budget. So while there's a lot of sort of views within retail that a lot of it is kind of trade spending and redirect, many of the retailers are seeing it coming from an entirely new budget amongst the brands and agencies. Some of the others, you can see there's a sort of shift from non-retail specific to specific retail and so on. But really, it's those top two there where it's funds allocated for other tactics, but also this entirely new budget is significant, I think, and it shows that not only is it a new revenue stream for retailers, it's potentially new money entering the marketing stream and entering therefore the retail world, which is good news. Some of the key retail media networks we look at in the report, we do many, so I've just picked out a few that sort of show some of the differing ways in which this works. Obviously, Amazon advertising is the sort of biggest of all of them. It's enormous. It's potentially a third of the entire retail media market, if you go on a sort of figure of it being about 150 billion. Revenues of 47 billion in 2023. Its USP is that it can target shoppers right at the point of purchase. It's been doing it for years. It's part of like the sort of Amazon way of running anyway. So it's got form. It's really demonstrated how effective this can be, and increasingly it can be integrated with other Amazon properties like Prime and its voice command sort of voice commerce platform Alexa, and in theory anything else that it comes up with, creating much more sort of ad opportunities. A lot of what Amazon does is sort of essentially display adverts, product placements, and the sort of, top of the buy box and all that kind of thing. And increasingly, it has these other opportunities to do some really sophisticated ad placement, and this is only going to, I think, see Amazon grow even further. Here in the UK, Co-op Media Network is another interesting one. It's focusing on in-store, but in its convenience stores. I mean, it does like the full gamut of retail media, but it's focused mainly on the convenience store side, and it's an attractive proposition. It's different. It offers brands a very different place to sell and a very different place to market themselves in front of consumers, a different kind of purchasing mindset. But interestingly, research it put out this week, in fact, is that local retailers, other retailers selling those same brands are seeing a halo effect of sales of those things. So the retail media you're getting in a co-op convenience store is driving people to buy it there and then in co-op, but it's also increasing sales of those products in the local area in supermarkets. So people are maybe picking up a 4-pack of beer that they see advertised in their co-op on their way home to watch the football or the tennis or whatever's on. But they're then at the weekend buying a much bigger pack of those beers at their local supermarket. So it's having an interesting halo knock-on effect. It's also interesting because co-op is a community. It's a cooperative, hence the name. It can leverage all that sort of data and those sort of people that are part of its community, and it's sort of essentially inherent loyalty scheme to help drive sales, and that makes it quite an interesting retail media proposition. Market Media, New Zealand's leading multi-sector retailer. It sort of is one of the pioneers of retail media outside of Amazon, and while it has a sort of fairly small market because it's New Zealand is a small market, it is still seeing sort of 2 million in-store visitors, 3 million online visitors each week who are all marketing it, and it's developed this very sophisticated and quite sort of excellent retail media proposition. So anyone new to retail media wanted to find a sort of an interesting example of one, check out Market Media. It's really interesting. They really sort of got a handle on how to make this work, particularly for a smaller market, which I think is going to be prescient for smaller retailers looking to offer some sort of retail media to brands. But we'll come to that when we have a discussion. Tesco's Media and Insight platform, huge, but the UK's largest retailer. It's been running its retail media offering for quite some time. It leverages its vast Tesco's customer base, which is millions of people each week shopping there. Plus, it has 20 million club card users and all that lovely data, and it already has 450 brands using it. And they integrate the adverts into their website and app really effectively. You don't even really notice you're being advertised to, which in my mind is possibly the kind of holy grail of doing this. And Uber, I just threw in as an example of a non-retailer retail media network. There's a lot of non-retailer retailer media networks cropping up. Anyone that has the first-party customer data can essentially sort of sell advertising that targets those people. Uber's just one of them, and it does people across its cab ordering, food delivery, and in-ride audience. So it's got access to a massive range of people, and it can do digital and physical offerings, including sort of adverts on the roofs of its taxis, on the delivery bikes, all that sort of thing, as well as sort of digitally. And it's an interesting one, I think, to watch. There are many other non-retailer ones that I think are going to be significant, and I think that's probably a subject for a whole other webinar, the non-retailer side of it. But Uber is an interesting example. There's many other examples in the report of all sorts of ones from around the world and how they work, what their USP are, what they offer, and who's using them. So again, check out the report for some more on that. So briefly, what do brands get out of this? How do they view the market? Brand adoption of retail media is reasonably high. Again, as you can see, higher there in the US than Europe, but pretty comparable. The average sort of worldwide, the data we have is about 56%. So more than half of brands have adopted it. A significant number there, another quarter, 24%, if you take the average, are investing in on-site with off-site to come. So that's adverts on websites rather than in physical locations. And there is around about 14% who are investing in on-site only. Very small amount, 7% there, not investing in it at all. So if you look at it that way round, only 7% of brands are not looking at some form of retail media. So it's clearly very much part of the brand marketing mix. Budget allocation amongst brands, as you can see there, sort of around about 74% or so. So 3/4 are spending between 11 and 50% budget allocation on it. Some are spending a lot more, but some very few are spending a lot less. So it's a significant part, of their budgeting for advertising is going to retail media already, which I think is sort of fairly sort of plain in terms of, because you can see the sort of level of revenue that retail media is generating for retailers. So it's now become already a very significant part of the retailer and the brand sort of marketing process. That will only continue to expand. Measurement is one of the key things for brands. We focus on that in more detail in the report, but as you can see there, just to sort of look, they're typically looking for sales and some sort of ROAS, the return on ad spend, which any of you that work in retail media will see bandied about all over the place. They're also quite interested in total reach. So really it is about driving sales, and it is a very direct way of driving sales. You're advertising right in front of people on a website where they can actually click and buy. And that's part of the beauty of it. The data that these retailers have about their consumers and this sort of delivering the right ad at the right moment at the point of purchase is a very powerful mix. I think that's what's really driving this to become a mainstream part of the advertising world. It's going to be ubiquitous very soon. A little look on click-through rates. Interestingly, click-through rates are reasonably low at this stage. I think there are many factors for that. I think it is that many of these adverts appear either as part of a wider sort of display of products, so they're just getting the amount of click-through that products will get because people are looking for a specific product. I think also some of the adverts are potentially not always rendered very well. It can be a bit overt on some places, not overt enough on others. So I think there are issues that sort of affect click-through rate, but click-through rate is rising, albeit slowly. And I think as more money is spent on this and the things become more sophisticated, this number will go up. But I'll be interested to hear Octavie's views on that. So that's a whistle-stop view of some of the highlights in the report. As I say, there's a lot more in there that looks at not only the retailer perspective, but also the brands, the agencies, the consumers, as well as like delving into a load of retail media networks. It's a report that will keep evolving and growing. We'll be doing another version of it later in the year with updated data and even more facts and fun fact stuff as it evolves, particularly around the sort of physical in-store stuff, which is really starting to take off at the moment. But that's for another day. So that's some of the key things from the report. I'm going to bring in Octavie here, who's very patiently sat and listens to me waffle through all of that. From your point of view, Octavie, I mean, from a sort of a high level, as a sort of technology provider to people building retail media networks, what are some of the challenges do you think that sort of retailers are facing trying to get this going?
It's an interesting question because you mentioned the huge potential of the market. You know, you show some number that say $155 billion in 2026. So it's a huge market. But as every big and growing market, there is requirements and challenges. And so I think some of them, for example, for retail media can be stakeholder management and engagement, because you need to engage the sellers, advertiser, brands, but also the customers. You have also all about differentiation, because as you mentioned, it's a competing space. And so you also need to create a proper value proposition. And after, there is also, I think, one of the challenges is to find the right balance between monetization and customer experience. And so, for example, if we come back to the stakeholder management, what we like to say is that retail media, to be successful, it's win-win-win. And so it's a win for the retailer, a win for the advertiser, and a win for the final customer. And so it's super important to engage them in the right way. And it can be a challenge because you clearly need to define a value proposition for each one of them. So
okay.
I would, yeah.
Yeah, go on, carry on.
I would say it's one of the challenge. The second one is as mentioned, is finding the right balance between monetization and customer experience. It's really kind of enhance the customer experience through retail media and not impact it negatively, which is a challenge. And you need to test it and to be clear on what you expect. You need to follow KPIs to make sure that you still have a good customer experience. And one I didn't mention, but I think it's a challenge from the beginning, is to find the right technology partner, because you need to find the technology partners that will fit your needs, that will support you during this long journey. So not short term, but in a sustainable way. And so it's key to make a good due diligence from the beginning and to be clear on what are your objectives.
Interesting. We'll come back to some of those points, I think, actually, because there's quite a few interesting things to unpack there, particularly the thing about consumers. I want to sort of like come back to that sort of towards the end. But one thing that sort of looking at this and doing the research into it that sort of I'm undecided about is there a sort of I guess a size limit to being of a retailer that can have a retail media network? I mean, is it something that only super large retailers can do, or is this something that can be done sort of almost regardless of size?
This question, a lot of players are asking it, and it's an interesting question. But I think most of the retailers can benefit from retail media. But indeed, there is some limitations, which can be, for example, traffic, quantity and quality of data and resources. But I think the size doesn't make success. You know, it needs to be, you need to also involve different elements to make sure that you are successful. So indeed, large retailers, they will benefit from a big volume of traffic on their website, and so a significant audience to offer to advertisers. They will have a high quantity of data, which will allow to have a better relevancy and personalization of the ads. But on the other side, smaller and medium retailers, they also have a specific audience. And sometimes it can be a niche audience, which is really valuable for some advertiser. They can also create a really good and really personalized customer experience that advertiser will also value. So I would say one of the most important things is also to develop a retail media program which is customized to your specificities and understanding your audience, to make sure that whatever your size is, you have a clear value proposition for everyone.
Yes, interesting. And so, like in practical terms, like how would a retailer, large or small, sort of go about sort of creating a successful retail media network? Like what are some of the steps that need to be taken? You've touched on some of them about sort of having to understand whether you've got the traffic and the data, but what you know, talk us through how you actually do it.
Yeah, so when in your report you mentioned, you know, retailer, advertiser, and so indeed a retailer, when he wants to launch his retail media program, when he wants to scale it, he needs to define the right value proposition for the advertiser. He needs to onboard them and to retain them. It's key for him. Mm-hmm. And so the first step is about onboarding, is about adoption. So it's key to offer to the advertiser to understand them, and after to offer a platform which is easy to use, which is transparent, which is also scalable, to make sure that every advertiser can adopt the platform. Not only large brands, but also mid-tail and long-tail, which want to invest more and more into retail media. So for us, adoption is key. And after, you have all about retention, which is key, because if you want to scale your program, you need to have a sustainable retail media program. And for this, you need to retain your advertiser. And so they need to see that advertising are performing in the right way. And after, they can follow different KPIs, but they really need to see that they have a good ROI behind their investment. And after, we mentioned, as I mentioned at the beginning, we mentioned so advertiser, and there is also customers. And I think a key lever for success of a retail media program is about the engagement of the customers. And so it's about having a relevant and personalized, retail media program, you need to make sure that you show the right product to the right person at the right time. So it's super important to have a technology which allow you to have this relevancy and personalization. And after also, so for customers, there is relevancy and personalization. And of course, there is balance between monetization and customer experience, meaning that you need to define some placements. You need to have a native ads to make sure that everything is good for the customer. And I would say one of the last points, which is also an enabler of the two other, is about finding the right technology. Because retail media program, you need to define your strategy, you need to onboard advertiser, to onboard customers, but for this, you need to have the right technology. And the right technology is a technology that innovates, that, for example, in 2024, that integrates AI, which is key today to push the right product to the right person. It's a technology that allows you to scale, so that allows you to onboard easily the advertiser. So it's through, for example, self-service, with an intuitive self-service and a completely automated self-service. It's super important. And also technologies that for the retailers allow you to, I would say, to make the administrative burden, like invoicing, billing, light as possible. So by having all of this, so advertisers, customers, right technology, innovation, I think you have some of the elements to be successful.
To get it going, yes. What about those retail media networks and those retailers that already have a retail media presence? What do they do to sort of find new advantages and keep things sort of growing? Because obviously this is going to become something that all retailers pretty much are going to have a retail media offering. What are sort of some of the more mature ones? What other things can they do to keep this interesting?
Yeah, it's a good question, because we see more and more players coming into retail media. So the advantage that they could get from a retail media, it can be different one. You have, for example, the advantage for retailers of retail media can be an additional revenue stream. So through the monetization of your traffic and a revenue stream which is highly profitable, because you mentioned Amazon in your presentation and you mentioned the super high revenue from retail media, but what's in 2023, most of, in addition to the revenue, it became the first profitability stream for Amazon. So it's also about thinking that it's a gross lever of revenues, but also a profitability revenue. And I would say that additional competition will push retailers to innovate. It will push retailers to support even more advertisers. And so it's a way to challenge yourself and to improve your retail media program by launching new formats, by challenging your performance, by building stronger brand relationship, for example, because you can think also about how do I create a virtuous circle and how do I make sure that the advertiser will keep on investing, and it's through building this relationship with this key.
So what sort of things would sort of be measures of success for retailers doing this? What sort of, you touched on some of them there. I mean, I guess, selling more adverts means that it's working, but what are the sort of like metrics for measuring the success of this?
So for the retailers, I would say there is a lot of different metrics. You can have the first metric will be ad spend. After on ad spend, you will have the profit from the ad spend, but you have all the metrics about the advertiser. So it's percentage of your seller, brand, and supplier base who is investing into your retail media network. It's super important to follow this metric to see if there is retention or if there is some churn. After, you have the percentage of GMV, which is converted into ad spend by seller. Like this, you see it. And after, you can look at different KPIs according to the format, because you have some formats which are about performance, like sponsored product, some formats like which are about awareness, like display and video. So it's important also to follow some KPIs based on the different formats. And I would say after, you have also the ROAS, which is a KPI that is followed by all the industry. You have also fill rate. So there is a lot of different KPIs, and you really need to make sure that you are following the right KPI to be clear on your strategy and on your objectives. Because otherwise you can follow a lot of KPIs, but you need to make sure that the KPIs you want to prioritize are the ones that fit also your strategy. So it's an important point to follow. And I would say also satisfaction of advertiser is also a good KPI to follow.
Probably the best, yes.
Exactly.
I mean, there's a lot of talk around sort of also having to standardize what those KPIs are, so you can compare your performance on one retail media network with another, which again we go into in some depth in the report, and it's also something I think that we're going to look at in much more detail, because that's starting to become a really key issue in the industry now, about how to compare how things are succeeding. And obviously that's something that's of interest to retailers, but it's also very specific to brands, because they're the ones spending the money. What are some of the other things from a brand point of view do you think that brands listening might want to be aware of around retail media networks? I mean, obviously you work predominantly with the retailers, but what are some of the sort of things you think brands should know about this?
We work with both retail. We say that our clients are really both retailers,
okay,
and sellers and brand. It's super important, because one of the value proposition of Miracle Ads is we are really in the middle of the ecosystem, because today with Miracle, we have 450 retailers, which are our clients globally. And we have 100,000 sellers connected to our platform daily. So we really have supply and demand on both sides. So
both sides,
yeah, exactly. And so the value is to create connection between both of them and synergies. And for example, with Miracle Ads, we have some clients like Maison du Monde. On day one, all the brand and sellers became advertisers. So our clients are really boss. And I think you cannot make, as I discussed before with you, you cannot make a successful retail media program without involving both sides and making sure that everyone is on the same page. So for your question, I think the 2 points that you mentioned just before, standardization and consolidation, is something super important for the advertiser, and which will become more and more important in the coming months and coming years, because as mentioned in the report, we are more and more fragmented. There is more and more retail media networks. So for the advertiser, there is a need of consolidation, and there is a need of standardizations to be able to compare performance. But I to answer your question, I would say for advertiser, they need to define their strategy and their objective, because some of them, they will want to run a full on-site campaigns to make sure to reach the customers at each stage of his purchase journey. Other, they will just look at performance, so they will mostly invest on sponsored products. So I think to leverage the tool in a proper way, the advertiser really need to define its strategy and its objective before going into a platform and into a retail media network. After, one key things, because at Miracle, we also have the sales house sometimes. So sometimes retailers are delegating the sales house. So some things that we see is that for the advertiser, it's super important to test, to monitor, to learn, and after to optimize. Meaning that you will not have the good answer from the beginning. Sometimes you can have, obviously, and it's the best it's the best situation. But sometimes you have to test, to monitor your results, and after, like this, you adapt. You adapt your strategy, you adapt the product you want to push, and it's super important to be patient and to be open for when you start to invest on a retail media network. And after, another thing that we see is that you have different product maturity. You have some products which are new products. You have some products which are super performing products, some product low performing. And you need to adapt your strategy based on this, based on the product maturity, to make sure also that you leverage the right tool at the right moment. I would say it's something for us also super important. And a last point is, as an advertiser, now you have the choice of more and more platforms. You know, you can invest on different platforms. And so you need to find the right platform for you, for your need, for your strategy. You can choose a lot of them, but you need to make sure that this platform is easy to use, give you transparency on the performance, give you standardized performance, as mentioned before. So I think it's some key success factors also on the advertiser side. What do you think, Paul, on your side?
Well, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think the platform issue is quite an interesting one, isn't it? Because they've always been sort of, or typically up until now, they've been sort of managed services, retail media networks. Whereas in doing the research for the report, it started to become more apparent that there is a shift towards sort of a more self-service model. Which I think is interesting, because obviously there's a sort of issues within retailers in terms of trying to switch to being an advertising company. And where do you get the expertise? Where do you get the technology? How do you get the people to apply that expertise to the technology? And increasingly there's this sort of interest in self-service as well around it. So I think that's something that is increasingly sort of becoming interesting to the industry. I don't know, I mean, what are your thoughts on the sort of self-service versus the managed service model? What do you offer? Is yours managed or self-service?
It's both. We have decided to launch an hybrid model and to have managed and self-service. And I'm aligned with what you say. The trend that we see is a rise in the self-service. And I think it goes with the existing change into the retail media ecosystem. You know, you have more and more retailers launching, also new verticals that didn't do retail media before. So on the retailer side, there is a diversification, but also on the advertiser side, because you used to have really large brands, and now you have, as we say, mid-tail, long-tail, you have marketplace sellers. And all these different advertisers have different profiles. And some of them don't know a lot about retail media. Some of them know perfectly retail media. And so you need to give them the tool to be able to use retail media in a proper way. And so self-service is a good way, for example, it's a good way to scale. It's a good way to empower your advertisers. And so at Miracle Ads, we have developed managed and self. And on self-service, we really wanted to develop an intuitive platform, something easy to use, easy to adapt. And that's why we have developed a platform you can use in a manual way, but also in a fully automated way, meaning that we leverage AI to have fully automated campaigns. Selection of product, keywords, and bid price, which is amazing, but because we see a super good traction in terms of adoption and retention of advertiser, because everybody can adopt retail media now. And so indeed, for us, it's super important, and it allows retailers also to have scalability, because like this, they can onboard, thousands of sellers. We have some marketplaces, for example, who have thousands of sellers on it. And if they want to monetize their marketplace, they need to onboard most of them. And so they need to have a solution which is scalable, and self-service is one of the answers to scalability for us. It's for sure, it's this. And after on the advertiser side, what we see is that it also gives power to the advertiser. He will be able to create his campaign. He will be able to optimize his campaign to see real-time performance. So it will give him control on his retail media campaign, and so it's important for them. And what we see is that after, a requirement of self-service is really to have intuitive, easy to use platform, and platform who leverage AI. It's super important to be able to have to provide the best tools, the best performance.
No, I agree. I think sort of AI is going to be, I mean, it's significant in most sort of facets of modern life, but I think it is going to be a really significant technology in retail media because it helps with this. Well, it intelligently automates what you need to do, which helps sort of overcome sort of skills shortages, which there is to some degree within retail media in the retail side of it. But also it just can keep pace with the rapid needs to serve the right kind of content in the right place at the right moment, which you, in many ways, probably can't do with a team of people. You need so many of them that it just becomes not cost effective. So yeah, I think AI is going to be extremely significant, and is possibly what will make this really work. So it's interesting to see how you're using that. You did touch earlier on when we were sort of at the beginning of our discussion about consumers. It's important not to sort of lose sight of the consumer side of this. What are some of the things that sort of, I guess, retailers and brands need to consider in terms of sort of being able to sort of deliver this, but without compromising the sort of user experience?
Yeah, it's a super important point. Consumers need to be at the forefront of the retail media strategy. To have a successful retail media program, it needs to be seamlessly integrated into the customer experience, and to make sure that you don't impact negatively the customer experience. Because a retail media program which is well done can have a positive impact on the customer experience. So you have, on the customer experience, you have relevancy and personalization, which is key. And on this, as you mentioned, AI is also a super powerful tool to make sure that you push the perfect ad at the perfect moment, at the perfect person. And so at Miracle, we leverage a lot AI. We have a team of data scientists investing in it, and we see a super strong result in our clients. So for us, it's key, and it allows us to really maintain, if not enhance, the customer experience. And another point that we also mentioned earlier for the customer experience, it's also find the right balance, not have a 100 sponsored ads placement on the first page. It's really to make something which is seamlessly integrated into the website, and something where you can leverage the different formats that you have available, sponsored product, video, shoppable ads, to make sure that you provide the best experience possible. So it's all about some balance, relevancy, and personalization, I would say.
And what about that sort of the last slide I had up there was about the click-through rate being quite low, which is obviously, I guess, a consumer issue because the click-through rate's low. I had a few sort of ideas as to why I think that's the case, but I'm not I can't find anything definitive in it when I was researching the report. What are your thoughts? Why do you think the click-through rate potentially looks like it's a bit on the low side with retail media?
So CTR is a complex and nuanced topic, I think, because you have different factors which can play a role on CTR. You have, for example, relevancy. If you have high relevancy and personalized ads, CTR will be higher. If you have low relevancy and personalized product, it will be lower. So relevancy is key and can have a strong impact on the CTR. The other key factors that can have an impact on the CTR is about placement, because in the ads you have different placements. You can have home page, you can have category page, and it can also impact the CTR positively or negatively. But the other point that I wanted to mention is that CTR is a good KPI to look at, but for sure not the only one to look at, because retail media is broader than CTR, because you can have a lower CTR but high conversion rates, because the clicks are highly qualified and come from qualified audience. Sometimes you have lower CTR, but you are looking for brand awareness. So it's a different KPI that you will look at. So I think it's an important KPI to look at, and you can impact it and you can improve it through having a good technology with a good algorithm for relevancy and personalization. You can impact it by having good creatives, by having a creative which engage people. You can improve it by having creative formats. So again, you need a tech which allow you to have different formats, but you also need to look at other KPIs that are important for retail media based on the strategy of the advertiser, I think. So it's a complex one, but something that we should nuance according to the strategy.
I think you're right, and one of the conclusions I drew was that the fact that it is so personalised means that you're not necessarily going to get a large number of clicks, but those clicks are much more likely to buy something. And I think also that the research subsequently that I've seen from Co-op, that the retail media sort of display in a convenience store is driving sales of the product elsewhere. So yeah. It's not necessarily sort of, it's one of the things you need to measure, but it's not necessarily telling you the whole story. So exactly. I think, that's what's interesting. And I think sort of the fact that so much money is being spent on retail media advertising and the proposition for it is so strong that actually maybe sort of those click-through rate statistics aren't necessarily sort of the thing to kind of focus on. Really what it's about is does it lead to an uplift in sales? And it's harder to measure that because you don't know where those sales are then going to take place, but it does seem to work. So on that positive note, I think there's so much more we could talk about this, but we've done 45 minutes. I think that's probably a good place to stop. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom and interest. Thank you, everybody, for listening. The report's available to be downloaded. As I say, it goes into a lot more detail. It's such a fast-moving subject that it probably doesn't cover everything that it needs to, but we will be updating it on a regular basis, so that there's more to come. But in the meantime, thank you very much for listening. Octavie, thank you very much, as I say, for joining us and sharing yours and Miracle's wisdom. It's a very interesting proposition, Miracle's one, because of the marketplace tie-up. But you'll see why when you read the report. So thank you very much for doing that. Thank you for listening, and we'll see